Why is there a black woman mopping my hallway during a $10,000 gala? Margaret Thornton. Hotel owner. Valentino gown. Diamonds worth more than most people's houses. I'm sorry, ma'am. I was told to clean. Clean? Look at yourself. You smell like bleach and food stamps. Like Section 8 housing and failure. Denise Sullivan gripped the mop handle. Head down. Silent. This is the Lexington. Billionaires walk these halls, and you're dripping poverty on my marble floors. Margaret stepped closer. Know your place. Stay invisible. That's what your kind does best. Heels clicked away. Laughter followed. But Denise's eyes lifted, just once, toward the kitchen doors. Warm light. The smell of butter and saffron. Tonight, one billionaire would taste a single bite. He would stop chewing, demand to see the chef. They would point at the black woman with the mop. Have you ever been judged by your skin and your uniform, while hiding a gift no one thought to look for? The Lexington Hotel was built in 1923, during the golden age of American excess. For nearly a century, it had served as a temple for the nation's wealthiest families. Presidents had slept in its penthouse suites. Hollywood legends had exchanged wedding vows in its grand ballroom. Titans of industry had made billion-dollar deals over whiskey in its private lounges. And every October, the hotel hosted an event that all of New York would sell their souls to attend. The Culinary Excellence Gala. $10,000 a plate. 200 guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. 5 celebrity chefs competing for a $500,000 charity prize. Camera crews from every major food network. Crystal champagne flutes clinked in manicured hands. The sense of old money and culinary ambition hung thick in the air. Near the entrance, a bronze plaque read, "Excellence is not a birthright, it is a choice." Tonight, those words would become prophecy. Denise Sullivan was 36 years old. Single mother. Night shift janitor at the Lexington, 11 at night until 7 in the morning. Day shift prep cook at a struggling soul food restaurant in Harlem. 4 hours of sleep on a good night. 2 subways and a bus to get anywhere. A cramped one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx with her 8-year-old son, Elijah. Nobody at the Lexington knew her last name. To them, she was just the cleaning lady. The invisible woman who scrubbed toilets at midnight while billionaires sipped champagne above. She had been invisible for 3 years. But Denise Sullivan had a secret. Inside her rusted locker, hidden behind a spare uniform, was a leather-bound notebook. Brown leather, worn with age. Pages filled with hundreds of handwritten recipes. Notes crammed into every margin. Add basil at the very end. Temperature 165 degrees, no higher. Grandma's secret, 1 drop of bourbon, never more. And taped to the locker door was an old photograph. A little black girl, about 10, standing in a commercial kitchen next to an elderly black woman in a white chef's apron, both holding a golden pie, both smiling like the world belonged to them. Faded handwriting at the bottom. Ruby's Kitchen, Lexington Hotel, 1982. Ruby Sullivan. Denise's grandmother. The woman who taught her everything about food, about turning simple ingredients into something that could make people weep. The woman this hotel had erased from history. Margaret Thornton was 62 years old, 3rd-generation owner of the Lexington Hotel. She had inherited it from her father, Charles Thornton III, who had inherited it from his father. 3 generations of gatekeepers standing at the velvet rope of American high society, deciding who was allowed to enter, and who would forever remain on the outside. Margaret had perfected the art of elegant cruelty over 6 decades of practice. She delivered devastating insults with a warm smile. She wielded phrases like, "Bless your heart," like daggers wrapped in silk and dipped in honey. She believed, truly believed, that discrimination was simply maintaining standards, that people like Denise Sullivan were necessary for the building to function, but should never, ever be seen. In her corner office on the hotel's top floor, Behind a row of leather-bound books that she had never actually read, there was an old photograph in a tarnished silver frame. It was lying face down on the shelf, hidden, gathering dust, as if someone couldn't bear to look at what was in it. Victoria Price was 40 years old, executive chef of the Lexington for 8 years. Her face had graced Food and Wine and Bon Appetit. Critics called her a culinary genius. Her career was built on one signature dish, a saffron lobster bisque that food writers described as transcendent. But Victoria harbored a secret. That recipe wasn't hers. In her locked drawer was a notebook labeled Mom's Recipes, but the handwriting inside didn't match. It belonged to someone else, someone erased from this hotel 40 years ago. Samuel Brooks was 68 years old with gray hair cropped close to his scalp and hands that still remembered how to hold a chef's knife. Head of maintenance at the Lexington for 42 years. He had started his career in this very building's kitchen, a young black man with fire in his belly and dreams of becoming a great chef. Somehow, somewhere along the way, those dreams had died. He had ended up fixing light bulbs and unclogging toilets instead. Nobody ever asked why, but Samuel knew things. He remembered what happened in the summer of 1985. He knew who had really created the recipes that had made this hotel famous. He knew why a brilliant black woman had walked out the service entrance one August afternoon with nothing but a cardboard box in her arms and tears streaming down her face. And in Samuel's own locker, wrapped carefully in a piece of old cloth, was something he had been protecting for 4 decades. Waiting for the right moment. Richard Cross was 58 years old and worth more money than most small countries. Tech billionaire. Self-made man. Forbes magazine ranked him among the 100 wealthiest people in America. But Richard had a secret that none of those profiles ever mentioned. He grew up dirt poor in a trailer park in rural Georgia. His father had abandoned the family when Richard was 5 years old. His mother worked double shifts at a truck stop diner just to keep the electricity from being shut off. And his grandmother, a woman named Hattie Cross, she had raised him on meals conjured from nothing. Scraps, leftovers, love. Richard Cross knew what real food tasted like. Not the expensive kind served in Michelin-starred restaurants, the kind made with soul. Tonight, that knowledge would change everything. Jean-Pierre Laurent was 55 years old, 3 Michelin stars, trained in Lyon, cooked for presidents and kings. But Jean-Pierre wasn't arrogant. He was honest, and he could recognize true talent from a mile away. Late that evening, Denise pushed her mop past the kitchen doors. Through the small window, she saw Victoria tasting a sauce and frowning. Victoria added salt. Denise shook her head slightly. "That's not the problem," she whispered to herself. "The temperature was too high. The stock is already burnt." A security guard walked past. "Denise, no loitering near the kitchen." "Yes, sir. Sorry." She pushed her cart away, but her eyes lingered on those kitchen doors for just a moment longer. "One day," she told herself, "one day they'll see what I can do." She didn't know that day was tonight, 6:45 in the evening, 15 minutes until service. The kitchen was a symphony of controlled chaos, 5 cooking stations arranged in a gleaming semicircle, camera crews from Food Network adjusting their angles, food critics murmuring into voice recorders, the relentless percussion of knives against cutting boards, the hiss and sizzle of butter hitting hot pans, the shouted orders of sous chefs trying to keep their teams in line. Victoria Price stood at her station like a general surveying a battlefield she was absolutely certain she would win. Before her sat her masterpiece, a massive copper pot filled to the brim with saffron lobster bisque. 4 hours of painstaking, meticulous work. The dish that had built her empire. Golden orange and shimmering, it smelled of the sea and expensive saffron and everything that money and reputation could buy. Tommy was 22 years old and absolutely terrified. He had only been working as a prep cook at the Lexington for 3 weeks. Right now, he was carrying a massive stockpot filled with boiling water across a kitchen floor slick with spilled oil, trying to move fast enough to avoid being yelled at. He didn't see the electrical cord snaking across his path until it was far too late. His foot caught. His body lurched forward. The heavy pot tilted in his straining arms. Time seemed to slow down to a crawl. The pot tipped past the point of no return. Boiling water arced through the air in a deadly silver ribbon. The water hit Victoria's station with a violent hissing splash. Her copper pot, 4 hours of work, the centerpiece of the entire evening, was knocked from its burner. It crashed to the tile floor with a sound like a cathedral bell tolling a death knell. Saffron gold liquid spread across the white tile in an expanding pool. 4 hours of work, 12 lobsters. Saffron worth more than gold. All of it flowing into the floor drain, swirling away into darkness. Victoria's scream echoed off the stainless steel walls. No, 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 no! The kitchen doors burst open with a bang. Margaret Thornton swept in like an avenging goddess, her red gown billowing behind her. What in God's name is happening in my kitchen? Victoria's voice came out as a strangled croak. The bisque. It's all gone. There was an accident. I can't remake it in time. What do you mean you can't remake it? Margaret's voice could have frozen the flames on the stove. Richard Cross specifically requested that dish. Richard Cross, Victoria, the man who donated $2 million to this gala tonight. I would need at least 4 hours. You have 15 minutes. Margaret turned to face the assembled kitchen staff. Can anyone here make a lobster bisque in 15 minutes? Silence. The cooks exchanged helpless glances. No one raised a hand. Out in the service corridor, Samuel Brooks was balanced on a stepladder, changing a flickering light bulb. He heard the commotion clearly through the thin walls. He looked down from his ladder. 20 feet down the corridor, Denise Sullivan had paused her mopping. She was listening too. Their eyes met across that expanse of worn linoleum. Something passed between them in that look. An understanding. A question. A possibility. Samuel climbed down from his ladder slowly. He straightened his work shirt. Then he walked into the kitchen with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent 42 years waiting for this exact moment. Mrs. Thornton! Margaret spun around, her face twisting with irritation. What? Who are you? Samuel Brooks, ma'am. Head of maintenance. I've worked in this hotel for 42 years. He stood tall despite her withering glare. I believe I know someone who can help you with your problem. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You? You're the maintenance man. I am. But I know people in this building that you've never bothered to look at. I know someone who can make that bisque if you're willing to trust me. Margaret looked at him, looked at Victoria's devastated face, looked at the clock on the wall. Fine, 15 minutes. But if that dish doesn't appear on Richard Cross's table, you and whoever this mystery person is will never work in this building again. Samuel walked out of the kitchen and found Denise waiting in the corridor. You heard all that? I heard. You know what I'm asking you to do. Denise looked at the kitchen doors. That bisque recipe, she said quietly. Victoria's famous signature dish. I know where it really came from, Samuel. Samuel nodded slowly. I know you do, child. Cook first. Then we'll talk about the past. Denise pushed open the prep kitchen door. The ingredients were basic. Shrimp shells, rescued from the garbage bin. Heavy cream. Basic aromatics. One lonely lobster tail. A handful of common spices. Not nearly enough for a traditional French bisque. Everything about this situation was wrong. But Denise Sullivan didn't cook traditional. She cooked Sullivan. She closed her eyes, drew a breath that seemed to reach all the way down to her bones. Okay, Grandma, she whispered. Let's see if you're still with me. Her hands began to move. To truly understand what Denise Sullivan's hands were capable of creating, you have to travel backward through time. 28 years into the past. A tiny apartment kitchen in Harlem, New York. Late afternoon sunlight slanting golden through a window smudged with fingerprints. The smell of onions caramelizing slowly in a cast-iron skillet. The fragrance of garlic blooming in hot oil. Something sweet and mysterious baking in a temperamental old oven. The year was 1996. Denise Sullivan was 8 years old. She stood on a wooden step stool that wobbled slightly with every movement, her small hands gripping the counter's edge for balance, watching her grandmother move through that cramped kitchen like music made visible. Ruby Sullivan was 62 that year. She wore a white chef's apron, faded and soft from 1,000 washings. If you looked closely at the embroidered patch on the chest, you could still make out the words, Lexington Hotel. "Come here, child." Ruby's voice was warm and rich as molasses. "Put your hand over this pan. Not too close now. Feel that heat?" Little Denise stretched out her small hand. Warmth radiated up from the cast-iron skillet, gentle as a blessing. "You feel that? That little tingle? That's how you know when the oil is ready for the onions. You don't need some fancy thermometer. Your hands will tell you everything you need to know." Ruby smiled, deep wrinkles creasing around her kind eyes. "That's something no cookbook can teach. It's got to live in your bones." "Grandma?" Little Denise's voice was curious, innocent. "Where did you learn to cook so good?" Ruby's hands never stopped moving, chopping, stirring, tasting. A lifetime of muscle memory flowing through her weathered fingertips. "My mama taught me, child. Back in Alabama, when I was even younger than you. We didn't have much, but Lord, we had flavor." She chuckled softly at the memory. "Then I came up north to New York City, got myself a job at a big fancy hotel in Manhattan, worked there for 15 years, ended up running the whole kitchen, 20 cooks working under me." Little Denise's eyes went round as dinner plates. "You were the boss? Of a whole kitchen?" "Head chef, they called it. Yes, indeed, baby, I was the boss." "That's amazing. Why did you stop?" Ruby's hands paused over the cutting board, just for a heartbeat. A shadow passed across her weathered face. "They decided they didn't want me anymore, baby. Said they needed someone different." "Different how?" Ruby set down her knife, knelt down slowly until she was eye level with her granddaughter. "Different is just a word that people use when they don't want to tell you the real reason for something. Remember that, child. When somebody tells you that you're not the right fit, what they really mean is something uglier, something they're too cowardly to say out loud." A year later. Denise was 9 years old. Ruby was teaching her the philosophy that would guide her entire life. "Listen to me now, baby." Ruby's voice was serious as a sermon. "Cooking isn't about following recipes like they're the word of God. Recipes are just suggestions, starting points. A real cook, a true cook, they listen to the food. They feel it in their spirit. They put something into every dish that nobody can ever steal from them." "What's that, Grandma?" "Memory, child. Love, pain, hope, all the things that make us human." Ruby pressed a hand to her heart. "When somebody eats food you made with your whole soul, they ain't just tasting ingredients. They're tasting a piece of you. That's what makes food holy." Ruby opened the refrigerator, took out 2 small containers. "This here is my secret. White miso paste and a touch of good bourbon. Don't you ever tell nobody, you hear me? This is what makes my bisque different from everybody else's. This is Sullivan family magic." 9-year-old Denise nodded solemnly. A sacred covenant between grandmother and granddaughter. 2 years later. 1999. A hospital room in the Bronx. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. the sharp smell of antiseptic and approaching death. Ruby was 64. The cancer had eaten her from the inside out. Her hand, once so strong and sure, trembled in Denise's desperate grip. Denise was 11 years old enough to understand what was happening, young enough for it to break her heart. "You remember everything I taught you, baby?" "I remember, Grandma. Every single recipe. I wrote them all down in my notebook." "Good girl." Ruby's voice was fading. "I need you to promise me something." "Anything, Grandma." "Don't be silent like I was." A single tear traced down Ruby's hollow cheek. "I let them take everything from me. My recipes, my reputation, my voice. I kept my mouth shut because I was scared." Her eyes found Denise's. "Don't you be scared, baby. When your time comes, you stand up. You speak out. Promise me." "I promise, Grandma, I promise." Ruby's eyes were closing. "One day, somebody's going to taste your food and understand. Might not be me there to see it, but somebody who belongs to me. Somebody's going to show the world." Her hand went limp, but Denise held on anyway. Held on until the nurses came to gently pull her away. After Ruby died, Denise's world collapsed. Her mother spiraled into depression. No money for cooking school, no guidance. At 17, Denise got pregnant. The father disappeared within a month. She dropped out of school. At 20, she was a single mother working double shifts, applying to every restaurant in the city. 52 applications over 3 years. 52 rejections. The same questions every time. "What culinary degree do you have? Where did you train? Who have you worked under?" She had Ruby's hands. She had Ruby's gift. But she didn't have papers. So Denise took the only jobs she could get. Dishwasher, cleaner, janitor. But she never stopped cooking. Late at night after Elijah was asleep, she would stand at the tiny stove. Practice, experiment, fill her notebook with recipes. Waiting. The morning of the gala, Denise stood beside Elijah's bed, watching him sleep. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a crayon drawing he had made for her the week before. The drawing showed Denise wearing a tall white chef's hat, standing in a big, bright kitchen. Above her head, in wobbly crayon letters, "Best chef in the world. My mom." Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. She tucked the drawing into her uniform pocket, close to her heart. "I won't be silent forever, baby," she whispered. "One day they'll see." The back prep kitchen was dark and cramped. No cameras, no audience. Just a single flickering fluorescent light and the distant thunder of the gala preparation. 14 minutes on the clock. Denise stood at the stainless steel counter, surveying what she had to work with. Shrimp shells, rescued from the garbage, heavy cream, basic aromatics, one small lobster tail, a handful of common spices, not nearly enough for a traditional French bisque. But Denise didn't cook traditional. She closed her eyes, took a breath that reached all the way down to her bones. When she opened her eyes, her hands began to move with a certainty that seemed to come from somewhere beyond herself. Step 1. Building the base. She threw a handful of shrimp shells into a screaming hot pan slicked with butter and a spoonful of tomato paste. The kitchen filled with a violent sizzle. Most professional chefs throw away shrimp shells. They consider them garbage. But Ruby Sullivan had taught her granddaughter to see differently. The shells contained the purest essence of the sea, concentrated ocean flavor that most cooks were too blind to recognize. "Wait for the edges to char," Denise whispered. "Don't be afraid of the color. The color is where the flavor lives." The shells turned deep amber, then almost burnt orange. A smell rose from the pan, sweet and briny and impossibly deep. Step 2. Building complexity. Denise grabbed a bottle of brandy, poured it into the pan. Flames erupted towards the ceiling, 3 feet high, dancing orange and blue. She didn't flinch. She stood her ground and watched the fire consume the alcohol, leaving behind nothing but depth. When the flames died, she added white wine, fresh thyme, 2 bay leaves, let it bubble and reduce. Samuel had positioned himself at the kitchen doorway, his body blocking the view of anyone who might walk past. "Sweet, merciful Jesus," he breathed. "She moves just like Ruby used to." Step 3. The cream. This was where most chefs went wrong. They dumped cold cream into a hot pot and wondered why their bisque tasted flat. Denise did something different. She poured warm cream into a small bowl, dropped in saffron threads, those impossibly expensive threads that cost more per ounce than gold, and she let them sit. "Never throw saffron into direct heat," she murmured. "Let it bloom. Let it wake up slowly. Give it time to release its soul." The saffron unfurled in the warm cream like tiny flowers opening to the sun. The liquid turned golden, then deeper, then the color of a Mediterranean sunset. She added the bloomed cream to the main pot. Colors swirled together, orange and gold and amber. Step 4. The secret weapon. Denise paused, looked around, listened. No one watching. She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small plastic container she had brought from home. White miso paste. No classically trained French chef would ever dream of adding Japanese miso to a French bisque. It would be considered sacrilege. But Ruby Sullivan understood what all those fancy culinary school graduates never could. Umami has no nationality. Flavor knows no borders. 1 small spoonful, stirred in gently. Then, 1 drop of bourbon. Just 1. For you, Grandma. Step 5. The finish. Denise strained the liquid through cheesecloth. It poured out like liquid silk, smooth and glossy and perfect. She ladled it into a pristine white bowl, garnished with a seared piece of lobster tail, a drop of chive oil, a whisper of freshly cracked pepper. The clock showed 45 seconds remaining. Denise slid the bowl across the counter toward Samuel. "It's done. Get it out there. Don't tell anyone where it came from." She stripped off the borrowed apron, picked up her mop, walked out of the prep kitchen like nothing had happened, back to being the invisible woman with the cleaning cart. The ballroom was a sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, 200 guests sipping champagne. Samuel moved through the crowd unseen and handed the bowl to Victoria in a quiet corner. Victoria stared at it. "Where did this come from? Who made it? You want to save your career tonight, or you want to ask questions?" No choice. She carried it to the judge's table, placed it in front of Richard Cross with her most confident smile. "My saffron lobster bisque, prepared specially for you, Mr. Cross." Richard looked at the bowl without interest. He had eaten thousands of bisques in his life. He dipped his spoon, raised it to his lips. The moment that liquid touched his tongue, everything changed. He stopped chewing. His eyes went wide. He looked down at the bowl like it had just whispered a secret he thought he had forgotten forever. You made this?" Victoria nodded. "Of course." Richard took another spoonful, then another. He said nothing, just ate. Jean-Pierre Laurent was watching from across the table, curious. He asked for a taste. 1 sip. His eyebrows shot toward his hairline. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. Something extraordinary was happening at the VIP table. And in the service corridor, completely unaware that her entire life was about to transform, Denise Sullivan pushed her mop bucket toward the next dirty patch of floor, waiting for a world that didn't know she existed to finally wake up and see. Richard Cross set down his spoon with a soft clink against the fine china. He pushed the bowl away, not because he was finished, but because he needed to understand what had just happened. "Who made this?" His voice cut through the ambient noise of the ballroom like a knife through silk. Victoria Price blinked. I already told you, Mr. Cross. It's my signature. No. One word. Cold and absolute. I've eaten at your restaurant 3 times. Your bisque is competent, technically proficient. He pointed at the bowl. But this is something else entirely. There's miso in here. Bourbon. There's a depth of flavor I haven't experienced in 35 years, since I was a boy eating at my grandmother's table. His eyes bored into hers. This is not your cooking. Jean-Pierre nodded slowly. Richard is correct. This isn't classical French technique. This is jazz, improvisation, soul music in liquid form. Someone has merged European tradition with something much older, much more primal. He shook his head. No culinary school teaches this. This comes from somewhere deeper. Margaret sensed control slipping. Richard, surely there's been some misunderstanding. Someone in this building is a better cook than your executive chef. I want to meet them. Right now. Victoria's face went pale as bone. Excuse me for just one moment. She walked quickly out of the ballroom and found Denise mopping near the kitchen entrance. Samuel was standing nearby. Victoria grabbed Denise's arm hard enough to leave bruises and dragged her into a dark alcove. Who the hell are you? Victoria's whisper was venomous. Where did you get that recipe? Denise kept her voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play stupid. Someone cooked in the back prep kitchen. Miso and bourbon. That combination isn't in any of my recipes. Victoria's nails dug into Denise's flesh. How did you know those ingredients? Denise raised her eyes and met Victoria's gaze without flinching. Because it's not your recipe. It never was. It belongs to my grandmother, Ruby Sullivan. The name hit Victoria like a physical blow. She staggered backward. What do you know about Ruby Sullivan? I know she was head chef at this hotel for 15 years. I know she created every signature dish this restaurant became famous for. And I know someone stole her recipes and built a career on the theft. Victoria's face cycled through shock, fear, and finally cold menace. Listen to me very carefully. Her voice dropped to a deadly whisper. You're a janitor. You have no degree, no certification. If you say one word about this to anyone, I'll report you for trespassing and health code violations. You'll be fired, blacklisted from every hotel in Manhattan. She stepped closer. And let's not forget, you're a single mother. An 8-year-old boy named Elijah? Child Protective Services takes a very dim view of mothers who work 16-hour shifts and leave their children unsupervised. One phone call from me and social workers will be knocking on your door. The blood drained from Denise's face. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about Elijah. Walk away. Forget tonight ever happened, and pray that I forget too. Victoria walked away. Her heels echoed like gunshots. Samuel appeared beside Denise. You all right? She knows my grandmother's name. How does she know about Ruby? Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Because that bisque recipe, Victoria didn't create it. Her mother worked here in the 80s, and her mother learned that recipe from your grandmother. Learned? Stole, Denise. They made Ruby write down every recipe she had ever created. 2 weeks later, they fired her. Said she didn't fit the new image they wanted for the restaurant. Denise felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. They stole her recipes, then threw her away like garbage? Your grandmother walked out the service entrance with nothing but a cardboard box. No one said goodbye. No one said thank you. Tears burned in Denise's eyes. She never told me any of this. She was ashamed, not because she did anything wrong, but because they made her feel worthless. Samuel put a gentle hand on her shoulder. But tonight, you proved who that recipe really belongs to. In the ballroom, Richard Cross was losing patience. I'm still waiting for an answer. Who made that bisque? Margaret attempted to regain control. Richard, Victoria has confirmed. Victoria is lying. And frankly, Margaret, I suspect you know more about this than you're admitting." The room went silent. "Search the kitchen staff," Margaret commanded. "Question everyone." Kitchen workers were lined up, questioned one by one. Each one denied knowledge. Derek Hayes stood in the shadows near the service entrance. He had seen Denise enter the prep kitchen. He had seen Samuel standing guard. He knew exactly what had happened. Victoria materialized beside him. "Derek, tell me what you saw tonight." "I didn't see anything, Chef." "Don't insult my intelligence." She leaned closer. "You want that head chef position that's opening up in the spring? One word from me and it's yours. Or one word about your reliability issues, and you'll never work in a professional kitchen again. Your choice." Derek looked across the room at Denise. Denise, who had shared her homemade lunches with him during late shifts, who had asked about his mother's chemotherapy when nobody else even knew she was sick, who had treated him like a human being. His hands were trembling. I saw someone. In the back prep kitchen. The janitor. The woman with the mop. I saw her cooking." Victoria's face lit up with triumph. Margaret raised her voice. "Security! Over here!" 2 guards appeared. "That woman there," Margaret pointed at Denise. "The janitor. She illegally entered the kitchen. Remove her from the building immediately." Every eye in the ballroom turned to stare at Denise. She stood there in her gray uniform, mop handle in her hands, utterly alone in a sea of designer gowns and $1,000 suits. Margaret's lip curled. "The cleaning lady. How utterly predictable." The guards grabbed Denise's arms. "You want to know who made that bisque?" Denise's voice rang out clear and strong, directed at Richard Cross. "It was me. And that recipe doesn't belong to anyone in this room except me. It belongs to my grandmother, Ruby Sullivan, the woman this hotel erased." "Get her out," Margaret snapped. "Now." They dragged her toward the service exit. Halfway there, something fell from Denise's uniform pocket. Elijah's drawing. It fluttered to the floor. A guard's heavy boot came down on it, leaving a black print across the crayon image of a smiling woman in a chef's hat. Denise saw it happen. "Wait, please. The drawing. Keep moving." The service door slammed shut behind her. Denise found herself in the dark alley behind the hotel. Dumpsters, graffiti, the smell of rotting food and broken dreams. She slid down against the cold brick wall. And for the first time in years, Denise Sullivan allowed herself to cry. Inside the hotel, Samuel spotted the crumpled drawing on the floor. He picked it up carefully. The boot print was clearly visible, a dark smear across Elijah's wobbly letters. "Best chef in the world. My mom." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. He walked to his locker, reached behind his spare uniform, pulled out something wrapped in old cloth, a leather notebook, aged and worn, the same handwriting as Denise's notebook, but older. Ruby Sullivan's original recipe book. The day Ruby was fired, she had given it to him. "Keep it safe," she had said. "Someday, someone's going to need the truth." Samuel had waited 40 years. Tonight, the waiting was over. In the ballroom, Richard Cross remained standing while everyone else sat frozen. "You just threw out the woman who made the best dish I've tasted in 40 years. Is that how you run this hotel?" Margaret stammered. "Richard, please. She was a janitor. She had no right. I don't care about rights. I care about talent." He started walking toward the door. "Bring her back or I'm leaving. And my $2 million is coming with me." "Richard, please be reasonable." He stopped, turned around. And for the first time, his voice wasn't cold. It was shaking. "You want to know why I care so much about a bowl of soup?" The room held its breath. "I grew up in a trailer park in Georgia. Food stamps and government cheese. My father left when I was 5. My mother worked double shifts at a truck stop diner, 70 hours a week, and still couldn't keep the lights on. He paused, swallowed hard. But my grandmother, Hattie Cross, she lived with us. And every night, no matter how little we had, she would cook. She could take nothing, scraps, leftovers, whatever was about to spoil, and turn it into something that tasted like love, like safety, like maybe everything was going to be okay. His voice cracked slightly. I haven't tasted anything like that in 35 years. Until tonight. Samuel Brooks stepped forward from the crowd. The old notebook was in his hands. Mr. Cross, your grandmother Hattie, did she ever work in Manhattan? In the 80s? Richard looked at him with surprise. She worked in a hotel kitchen for a few years, before she moved back to Georgia to help raise me. Was it this hotel? Silence. Yes, it was. Samuel nodded slowly. Hattie worked alongside a woman named Ruby Sullivan, head chef. Ruby taught Hattie everything she knew about cooking. The way Hattie cooked for you, the meals that got you through those hard years. She learned all of it from Ruby. Richard's face changed, something ancient moving beneath the surface. The woman you just threw out is Ruby's granddaughter. She learned from her grandmother. Same recipes, same techniques, same soul. Samuel held up the old notebook. This is Ruby Sullivan's original recipe book. She gave it to me in 1985, the day this hotel fired her. Richard looked at the notebook, looked at Samuel, looked at Margaret. His voice turned to steel. Bring her back, now! The service door opened. Denise walked back into the ballroom, still in her gray uniform, eyes red from crying, but her head was high. 200 people stared at her in silence. Richard Cross walked toward her. You're Ruby Sullivan's granddaughter? Yes. Your grandmother taught my grandmother to cook. Every meal that got me through my childhood. It all came from Ruby. His voice was thick with emotion. Tonight, you brought me back to that kitchen. Denise didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken Ruby's name with respect. I want to see more, Richard said. Another dish, your choice, cooked right here, in front of everyone. Margaret stepped forward. Richard, this is absurd. She has no training, no certification. Be quiet. Margaret's mouth snapped shut. I'll do it, Denise said quietly. But I cook my way, my family's food. Richard smiled for the first time all evening. That's exactly what I want. The center cooking station was cleared. The celebrity chefs stepped back to watch. Denise walked to the station. Her rubber shoes squeaked on the polished floor. She surveyed the ingredients: short ribs, root vegetables, stock, red wine, fresh herbs, butter. I'm going to make my grandmother's braised short ribs, the first dish she ever taught me, the dish that fed me when there was nothing else. She began. Step 1. Seasoning. She reached for salt and a small container of ground coffee. Jean-Pierre raised an eyebrow. Coffee? On beef? My grandmother always said coffee creates a crust, no coffee flavor, just depth. She rubbed the mixture onto the meat with her bare hands. Step 2. Searing. The meat hit a smoking hot pan. Thunder. Denise didn't touch it, just waited. Most chefs flip too early. They're afraid of burning, but the best flavor comes from patience. The meat developed a crust that was nearly black. Perfect. Step 3. Aromatics. Onions, carrots, celery. Then, unexpected additions. Ginger, star anise, cinnamon. Jean-Pierre leaned forward. She's combining French technique with Southern soul cooking and African spices. This isn't fusion. This is heritage. Step 4. The braise. Red wine poured in. Steam rose. Stock. Tomato paste. Covered. 20 minutes. While waiting, Richard came to stand beside her. With talent like this, why mop floors? I applied to 52 restaurants. Same answer every time. Where did I train? What degree do I have? I had Ruby's hands, but no papers. Richard was quiet. I applied to Stanford. Rejected. Built my first company in a garage. They said I didn't have the background. He looked at her. This world isn't built for people like us. But here we are. The timer beeped. Denise opened the pot. Aroma filled the entire ballroom. She plated. Tender short rib, glossy reduction, caramelized vegetables. Richard cut a piece, raised it to his mouth. He chewed slowly, then stopped. Tears streaming down his face. This is the dish my grandmother made for my 10th birthday. The last good day before we lost our trailer. I thought this taste was gone forever. Jean-Pierre tasted, set down his fork, stood up. Mademoiselle Denise, I have 3 Michelin stars. I have cooked for presidents, but I cannot make this dish. I don't have what you have. Memory, love, pain, hope. This isn't cooking. This is art. Applause started, spread, grew louder. Then, the service door opened. Samuel stood there. Beside him, Elijah, in pajamas and a winter coat. Elijah looked into the room, saw his mother standing in the light, everyone clapping. Mama! He ran through the crowd, crashed into Denise's arms. She held him tight, tears streaming. You see, baby? I told you. One day they'd see. Elijah looked up at her, smiling. You're the best chef in the world, Mama. I always knew. The applause faded. Margaret Thornton stepped forward with a plastic smile. Well, what an unexpected surprise. Of course, at the Lexington, we've always believed in discovering hidden talent. Richard cut her off. Margaret, stop. She froze. 30 minutes ago, you called this woman a janitor and had her dragged out the back door. I heard you say she smelled like poverty. Now you want credit? Whispers spread through the crowd. Phones appeared, recording. Denise stepped forward, Elijah's hand in hers. Mrs. Thornton, 40 years ago, my grandmother, Ruby Sullivan, was head chef at this hotel. The room went silent. 15 years she worked here, created every signature dish this place is famous for. And in 1985, your family made her write down all her recipes, then fired her, because she didn't fit the new image. Margaret's jaw tightened. That was 40 years ago. I wasn't even... But the recipes stayed. Denise's voice was steady. The bisque that made Victoria famous? That was my grandmother's recipe. Stolen. Rebranded. While my grandmother died in poverty. Samuel stepped forward with the old notebook. I started in this kitchen alongside Ruby. The day they fired her, she gave me this. He opened it. Ruby's handwriting. Ruby Sullivan's original recipe book, Saffron Lobster Bisque, created 1978, 7 years before Victoria Price was born. Victoria's face drained of color. My mother improved. You just admitted it came from somewhere else, Richard said coldly. He faced the crowd. Everyone here tonight witnessed what happens when people in power decide who gets seen and who stays invisible. Ruby Sullivan was a genius. She was erased because of her skin color. Her granddaughter has the same gift, and 20 minutes ago she was dragged out like a criminal. He looked at Margaret. I own 15% of this hotel. I'm demanding a full investigation into hiring and termination practices over the past 40 years. Anyone responsible for discrimination will be removed. Margaret stood alone. No allies, no support. Denise looked at her without hatred, just truth. You said I smelled like poverty. You were right. I smell like overnight shifts mopping floors, like 2-hour bus rides, like raising a child alone without knowing if I can make rent. She held up her hands, rough, cracked, scarred. But these hands know something no one in this room can buy. They know how to make a billionaire cry with a single bite. You looked at me for 3 years and saw nothing. Tonight, everyone saw. She turned, took Elijah's hand, walked toward Samuel. Margaret stood alone. Behind her, the plaque on the wall. Excellence is not a birthright. It is a choice. She had spent her life making the wrong choice. That night, after the guests left, Denise sat in the employee break room, Elijah asleep on her shoulder. Around her, the housekeepers, the porters, the security guards, the invisible workforce of the Lexington, finally seeing one of their own rise. Janelle, a young kitchen porter, showed Denise her phone. You're trending. #MopChef rises. 50,000 tweets in 2 hours. Samuel approached. Something in his hand, Elijah's drawing, still had the boot print on it, but intact. Denise held it to her chest, tears falling. Thank you, Samuel, for everything. Don't thank me. Ruby would be proud. 1 week later, the fallout began. New York Times front page, The Mop Chef, How a Janitor Exposed Decades of Culinary Theft. CNN, MSNBC. The videos had been viewed 40 million times. A board member entered Margaret's office. The board has decided, for the good of the hotel, you should resign as CEO. I built this hotel. Your father built it. You destroyed its legacy. Margaret signed the resignation letter. Victoria Price fared worse. Her social media flooded with accusations. Recipe thief. Career built on lies. Every restaurant withdrew partnerships. Every network went silent. She disappeared from public life. 1 month later. Tribeca, Manhattan. A new restaurant opened. Harvest, owned by Richard Cross. Denise walked in wearing a white chef's coat. Her name embroidered, Chef Denise Sullivan. Her team gathered. Young cooks from backgrounds like hers. In this kitchen, I don't care where you went to school. I don't care who you know. I care if you love food. I care if you're willing to learn. Yes, chef. I mopped floors for 15 years waiting for a chance. You have that chance now. Don't waste it. Yes, chef. Outside the restaurant, after service, Derek Hayes was waiting. Denise, can I have a minute? She stopped, said nothing. I know you have no reason to forgive me. I was scared. I was selfish. I threw you under the bus to protect myself. Yes, you did. I'm not asking forgiveness. I just want you to know. I understand now. Fear isn't an excuse for betrayal. Denise looked at him for a long moment. I don't forgive you, but I don't hate you either. Life will teach you what I don't need to. She walked away. 3 months later. Harvest was the hottest reservation in New York. The menu's first page featured Ruby's Bisque, original recipe by Ruby Sullivan, 1978, restored by her granddaughter, Denise Sullivan. Richard sat with investors. You ask why I invested $10 million? Because I believe in the person in that kitchen. She waited a lifetime to be seen. Now the whole world is watching. 6 months later. Harlem. An old building, renovated. A new sign above the door. Ruby Sullivan Culinary Center. Below it, excellence is not a birthright. It is a choice. Free culinary training for single mothers, low-income individuals, anyone with passion but no access. A place where talent mattered more than pedigree, where dreams were given a chance to breathe. Denise cut the ribbon. Beside her, Elijah, Samuel, Richard Cross. Inside, 20 students at cooking stations, single mothers, former prisoners, foster kids, immigrants. Everyone told they didn't belong in a professional kitchen. Denise walked among them. 6 months ago, I was mopping floors, invisible to everyone. Now I'm here. The only difference is someone finally gave me a chance. She stopped at a station where a young woman, 19, single mother, nervously held a knife. The world told me I couldn't be a chef. The world was wrong. And the world is wrong about you too. Let's prove it together. On the wall, 2 photographs. Ruby Sullivan in the Lexington kitchen, 1978. Finally, in the center, Denise and Elijah opening night at Harvest. That evening, Denise's apartment. Bigger now, but still simple. She stood at the stove, cooking for Elijah. He looked up from homework. Mama, when I grow up, can I cook like you? She turned, knelt to his level. You'll cook better than me, because you won't have to wait as long. On the windowsill, Ruby's recipe book under glass. Next to it, framed and illuminated by the evening sun, Elijah's drawing, boot print still visible. Denise opened the book to the last page. Ruby's shaky handwriting. One day, someone will taste and understand. Maybe not me, but someone who belongs to me. Denise touched the words, tears in her eyes, smile on her face. I did it, Grandma. They tasted, and they understood, and they will never forget us. If this story touched you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because every day, somewhere in this world, there's a person mopping floors, washing dishes, being invisible, while carrying something extraordinary inside that the world isn't ready to see. Something beautiful, something powerful, something that could change everything. Maybe that person is you, and if it is, don't give up. Don't let them silence you. Don't let them make you invisible forever. Your moment is coming. One day, they'll taste, and they'll understand. Tell us in the comments, what gift are you carrying that the world hasn't seen yet?